Pokrovsk is almost captured. Western analysts claim that Russia controls 85% of the city. Lavrov was hit. Anonymous Telegram channels reported a reprimand to the Russian foreign minister from Putin after the breakdown of negotiations in Hungary. New York is electing a mayor today. Why the figure of the main favorite, Zoran Mamdin, caused so much controversy around the world. Tuesday, November 4th. The Rain TV channel is on the air. This is an information program here and now. My name is Ekaterina Katrikadze. In the second part of the issue, as always on Tuesdays, the Katrikadze of Foreign Affairs. Ukrainian Pokrovsk is about to go. The Russian army has already managed to capture 85% of the city, according to the military analyst of the German publication Bild, Julian Repke. According to him, there are no signs that the Ukrainian counteroffensive will change the situation. The Russians managed to enter the central part of Pokrovsk with small infantry groups and gain a foothold there. But the Ukrainian army does not want to leave the city until the last moment. And this, according to Western military observers, creates a danger that some of the soldiers located in Pokrovsk itself and the neighboring Mir Nagrad will fall into the environment that Vladimir Putin announced a week ago. However, there was no environment then, but now the situation is getting worse, literally every hour. And if the fate of Pokrovskaya has already been decided, then the question arises as to what will happen after its capture. How will the loss of the city affect Ukraine's ability to defend the remaining uncaptured part of the Donetsk region, including the large agglomeration of Slavyansk-Kramatorsk? Let's ask Julia about it on Rebke himself, who joins us live. Julian Rebke, military columnist, senior editor of the German edition of Bild. Hello. Glad to see you. Thank you. First of all, of course, I want to ask you about the situation in Pokrovsk. Has anything changed by this hour? You said that 85% of the city is already occupied, and at 19:00 in Moscow. How are things?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it is important to understand that our conclusions, our analysis, is based on data from open sources. We conduct geolocation, analyze the available video. For example, when it was said about the attempts of a counteroffensive, and about the situation in the Pokrovskaya Peace Award itself. We received data, But I just wanted to make a reservation first, that our analysis is based on the analysis of available objective data. We had the latest information earlier today, at the beginning of the day. We believe that Russian troops are on the verge of occupying the last remaining areas of Pokrovsk in the northeast of the city at the same time. The Ukrainians tried to conduct a counteroffensive near a gas station, and there is a place in the center of Pokrovskaya. I was there in September last year, and this territory is still controlled by Ukrainian troops. Because we do not see any video evidence on Russian propaganda channels that the Russian flag was installed there. So there is no news about the central part of the city. If this part of the city was controlled by the Russian troops, it certainly would have been some videos. What you mentioned, yes, you are a fair assessment. 80% of the city. The Ukrainian military told us this 2 days ago. Since then, the situation has not changed much.
And as for the danger of encirclement of Ukrainian servicemen, how great is it now, at the moment?
Yes, there are several places where there is a possibility of surrounding the central part of Pokrovskaya. Actually, the Ukrainian military say that there are still Ukrainian troops in the southern part of the city who control certain positions. So it's not a secret. We don't know exactly where they are, but we do know that there are Ukrainian troops in the southern part of the city, while there are Russian troops in the northern part of the city. And there is also the City of the World of Awards. And there is a danger of encirclement there, too. So far there is no encirclement, I emphasize, so far there is no such information. That the Russians managed to completely cut all the roads, but there remains a strip only 3 or 4 kilometers wide. This is, of course, a very dangerous situation, because there are Russian kamikaze drones that have a range of up to 30 kilometers. And the Russians are using drones in this area. Therefore, Ukrainian troops are in Mirnograd and south of Mirnograd. There is quite a large territory there, which is controlled by Ukrainians. But this territory, it is still held by Ukrainians. This is an important fortified area. There are many trenches, many fortifications. And when we talked to the Ukrainian soldiers in this place, they said that it was safer for us to stay here than to try to leave here. Either they will help us somehow, or we will surrender. In extreme cases, it is very dangerous to try to leave here now. Therefore, so far there is no assault on these areas, but the situation for Ukrainians is very difficult.
I want to clarify, Yulia, that is, you are saying that Ukrainian servicemen do not leave Pokrovsk, not because it is a political decision or I don't know, a decision related to the defense of other settlements. But this is exactly because the command of the armed forces of Ukraine considers it unsafe for soldiers to leave the city at this stage.
Well, as for Pokrovsk, there, of course, the situation is a little different, not the same as in Mirnograd. Pokrovsk is now controlled mainly by Russian troops. And I'm talking about Mirograd. There, in Mirnograd, the Ukrainian military said, even if they give us an order to withdraw now, it will be just suicide to try to get out of here. Well, they have such black humor. They say, it is very good that we were not given the order to retreat, because it would be even more dangerous than continuing to hold our current positions.
Okay, well, then let's talk about what will happen later. If we imagine that Russia occupies Pokrovsk, perhaps the world of awards, how things will continue to be at the front, how serious a blow this is for Ukraine.
Well, first, I can't say whether the Russians were to win. I do not know how many Ukrainians have reserves. I know that President Zelensky has arrived at this sector of the front. He has one reserve brigade, he visited the troops there. There is talk about the reinforcements being transferred. It is difficult to say exactly how many reinforcements are being transferred. And I said that there are Russian drones operating in this place, which have a long range. So it's hard to say what will happen next. I think that the Ukrainians will have to start an organized retreat from this area at some point. After what happened to Azovstal in Mariupol, we heard Russians say many times that they took someone into the pot. That there were a lot of such conversations Avdiivka, Kupiansk-Lysychansk recently. Russians talk all the time. We have surrounded hundreds, if not thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, all of them in a ring. And then maybe they captured 20, 22, 25 people there, but that's it. Therefore, I think that the Ukrainians may be able to withdraw their troops from this encirclement, but it is getting harder every day.
Okay, I just read from military observers that the city's agglomeration of Slavyansk-Kramatorsk are under attack. Do you think that these are the prospects of seizing these territories of these settlements? And when such a threat looms over Slavyansk-Kramatorsk,
As you know, the Russians have been trying to advance north of Pokrovsk since mid-August. But their offensive was stopped by the attack on Dobrapilya. In a sense, you are right. Now, when the Russian troops that were advancing on Pokrovsk are released, they can be transferred to another section of the front. But at the same time, I'm sorry there are problems here, but on the other hand, the front line does not look straight. There are areas where the front has moved forward, there is the opposite. So the situation is not so straightforward. In this case, it will be easier for Ukrainians to defend Slavyansk-Kramatorsk, since they, too, will have part of their troops released if the front strives. So it's hard to say yet. At the moment the battles are being fought for Pokrovsk. There are no immediate threats to Slavyansk-Kramatorsk right now. There have been attempts to advance in this area, but they have not been successful. To the north of this section, also in the area of the estuary, the Russians tried to advance, but there too, the Ukrainians control 99% of the city. So let's wait for the situation to be resolved.
Yes, yes, yes. We will wait for the situation to be resolved. Of course, I just want to have time to ask this question about Storm Shadow. It is clear that Trump no longer gives Tomahawks to Ukraine, but if Ukraine can use long-range British missiles, this will change the situation somehow.
Well, you know that the British missiles have a maximum range of 5 kilometers. Then, they just can't fly. For example, in the area of Kstovo, in the district of the Novgorod region, they can't strike. The Ukrainians have just attacked a Russian oil refinery there. Here are Tomahawks. They really would have sufficient range for this kind of strikes, but Storm Shadow, unfortunately, do not have such a range. Let's see. Storm Shadow is a fairly simple rocket that uses a GPS system, and the Russians managed to jam the GPS signal. As for Storm Shadow, I do not know how much the British will give 50, a maximum of 100. I don't think it will really change the situation on the battlefield.
Well, thank you very much. This is Julian Repke, a military columnist, senior editor of the German edition of Bild. Thank you for participating in the broadcast. Now I'm going to ask you to like it. This is very important, and it helps our whole team a lot. Let's say, the more likes, the more we are with you. And don't forget that today's news release, like all the others, was made possible thanks. Today is the day of national unity in Russia. The country has a day off. Propagandists and officials wrote patriotic posts. The shaman presented a new song called the 4th of November, and Putin came to Red Square. How united are the people in Russia against the background of this very SVO? Yes, a big question. War and repression do not contribute to the mass enthusiasm grateful to the voters. Rather the opposite. And on this day, a huge monument to Ivan the Terrible, one of the most terrible dictators in the history of the country, was opened with pomp in Vologda. We see a lot of Len Didkovskaya's material after a conversation, which, yes, we just spent an hour ago, with historian Andrei Zubov. Andrei Zubov, Doctor of Historical Sciences, Professor of Masaryk University, is in touch with us. Andrei Borisovich, hello. I am glad to welcome you to the RAIN broadcast. Here we are watching the celebration of National Unity Day for a large number of Russians all day today, and this is in general. It has traditionally happened, so it is not entirely clear what it is about and why this day is celebrated on the 4th of November, and what it is connected with. Somewhere someone has heard about Minin and Pozarsky, and yet, I would like to ask you this: do you think about National Unity Day? How historically justified is it?
Well, you know, National Unity Day appeared as an alternative to the day of the October coup on November 7th. As everyone knows, and my generation knows it, suffered for a long time what to call it. They tried to call the Day of Consent and Reconciliation the 7th of November, but nothing happened. Because just in the Russian emigration this day of November 7th, November was called the Day of Irreconcilability. With irreconcilability with the Bolsheviks, irreconcilability with the bandit Bolshevik state. That's why it didn't work out. So Surkov decided to come up with it at the time, but let's make this a day of national unity. By the way, he even consulted me there at that time. And it seemed to me that this was a good date. Why? Because first of all, it is an old Russian church holiday. Secondly, he is not connected with any Poles. That is, he is connected with the Poles, but indirectly. It is primarily connected with the fact that the Russian people, feuding with each other, brought the country to complete ruin. To what is called in history, the time of troubles. And so this ruin continued. The Poles were already in the Kremlin. Naturally, the neighbors could not help but take advantage, and the Swedes were in Novgorod. In other words, Russia was dying, and the Russian people continued to be at enmity with each other, killing each other. The Cossacks were robbing. The militia really formed Citizen Minin and Prince Pozarsky. It was moving in Moscow, and already in Moscow this enmity continued, and the Poles felt calm. And on the 4th of November, a miracle happened with the Kazan icon of the Mother of God brought from Novgorod through Yaroslavl. This miraculous icon was found in 1579th year, back in the time of Ivan the Terrible, whose terrible monument was erected by Woody.
I will ask you about this again, Andrei Borisovich, separately.
It was at this moment that the Cossacks, the militia of Minin and Pozarsky, and many other groups that continued to fight and kill each other, suddenly felt an incredible pang of conscience. This is considered a miracle. They felt how guilty they were before God and before their country, that instead of defending and restoring it, they were at enmity with each other because of self-interest, love of power, money, anything. And they announced fasting, repentance. And after that, everyone united, of course, almost without more fighting, almost bloodlessly liberated the Kremlin. And the country recovered. Then Mikhail Romanov was elected to the kingdom, as is known at the beginning of the 13th year. And so it went, a new stage of Russian history began.
That is, in principle, you agree with this holiday and with its unifying function. But why doesn't it seem to work?
The idea of uniting people at the same time, when it was the 6th year. About 2006th year, everyone was at enmity with each other. There were communists again, there were either liberals or Democrats. People grabbed a lot of money, others dreamed of grabbing it. In general, there was such absolute hostility and terrible selfishness. At that time, just the idea of unity could be meaningful. And what has happened to date? First of all, a terrible war began, and secondly, an incredible justification of everything, just Soviet godfighting. Russians are trying to capture the city of Pokrovsk, but at the same time, it is called the Red Army in Bolshevik terms in Russian reports. It is not by chance that now, at the moment, fighting is underway in the city of Pokrovsk, a Ukrainian city. It was called the Bolshevik time in order to smooth out the name associated with the Mother of God, and with the protection of the Mother of God from the memory of the peoples of Russia. You see, now all this has lost that meaning. The meaning of the 4th of November there is the 17th, the beginning of the 17th century. And in fact, there is no National Unity Day. Now, in fact, there is a tragedy, and the future date will be completely different. On the 4th of November, she will no longer have a relationship. The 4th of November will remain in the memory of the Church. It is connected with those events of the time of troubles. I think this is the future date that we will all celebrate. And I am sure that you from Moscow, Katya, will talk about it in the rain. I don't know whether it's alive before this time or not, but
You will live.
you'll definitely live to see it.
Will live.
Yes, and this will be the date of the restoration of the dignity of Russia, when it will not be in the seizure of foreign lands. Not in the fact that. But where did Bolshevism begin? Then the Bolshevik bandits bought the people. They told him, grab the landowner's land, grab the merchant's land, plunder the loot. And people rushed. It's not the Bolsheviks who have sinned. Bolshevik bandits will be found everywhere. And the fact that the peoples of Russia have agreed in their majority to this terrible crime, to rob, kill, seize someone else's. And for more than 100 years, this Bolshevik government has been living by robbery, living by seizure. No longer at the frequent level of individual landlords there, possessions at the state level were seized by Stalin. Expanded the empire or Brezhnev and Khrushchev. And now Putin has taken over the land of Ukraine. That is, you understand, this is the succession of self-interest lies, fratricide for the sake of their own gain. That's it now prevails. We have to give it up. And when Russia is liberated, it will be freed from all this hassle of age-old Bolshevism. And it will be the revival of Russia, not reconciliation. After all, it is impossible to reconcile with evil. It is impossible for whites to reconcile with reds. It is impossible for robbers to reconcile with the robbed. This doesn't happen. And it's not necessary. It is necessary that people reconcile with God, reconcile with truth, honor and dignity. And it will be a new holiday of Russia. Whether Russia will be a secular country, or whether the religious element will not be strong, as in the same Great Britain now, I do not know. But in any case, the moral principle, if it is not restored in its purity, and not in its isolation, as Patriarch Kirill is now suggesting there, then this will be our future main national holiday.
Thank you for these words, Andrei Borisovich. I want to have time to ask you also about the monument you mentioned. The Ivan the Terrible monument was opened, which in fact the governor of the Vologda region, Georgy Filomonov, likes very much. Why did you call it terrible?
There is no monument in itself, you understand, it is now cast like these tombstone monuments. There are any monuments in large numbers, there is no soul or heart in them, well, there is some figurativeness in them, and that's it. In this sense, he is no worse and no better than others, but objectively speaking, of course, this is not art. This is not a monument to Peter, in this very not a monument to Peter the Great. And Falconetta is not a monument to Opkashinsky Pushkin, it's nothing. But he's terrible with the choice of topic. The fact is that, of course, the governor is an absolute lackey Pushkin, sorry, the governor is an absolute lackey of Putin. And naturally, he would not have dared to open anything, would not have dared to open it without the will of Putin and the presidential administration. Now this case is strictly handled in Russia. Therefore, it is, of course, Putin's will, obviously. And a terrible choice that they decided to glorify one of the most terrible murderers in the history of Russia. But it's like Romania would now open a monument to Dracula, let's say. After all, Valaksky was also a prince after all.
Yes.
And when they thought about creating a memory for the millennium of Russia, well, it was put in 60. At the beginning of the 62nd year of 862nd year, but of course, they planned for a year, 2 years earlier, they played historical figures carefully. There were a lot of them, there are more than 100 of them on this monument. But here is the figure of Ivan the Terrible specially cut down by Alexander II. He said that his people close to him, his advisors, said that this man is odious in the history of Russia. This is a terrible figure in the history of Russia. Even his first wife, the deceased Anastasia of Ivan the Terrible, was depicted on the monument, but not himself. Adashev, his advisor, who was later executed by him, but not himself. So the fact that the murderer is being glorified now is with the KGB. This is an excuse for their terrible actions in the past and now in the present. After all, no one took Navalny's murder off the books. Arrests, tortures and deaths of many human rights defenders have not been filmed. Well, in the past, the death of a murder for a shot in the back of the head of millions of people. So, exalting the murderer and the maniac, in fact justifies both Putin and the KGB system, which now rules the country itself. So this monument is naturally an accusation, like monuments to Stalin, which, in my opinion, the same sculptor put in Veliki Luki is, of course, an accusation to the regime itself. And they will not survive this regime for sure. They have no artistic values, and their moral significance is simply absolute cold.
Yes, thank you very much. I am incredibly glad that I was able to discuss this with you. This is Andriy Zubov, Doctor of Historical Sciences and Professor at Masaryk University, on the Dozhd TV channel. And in honor of National Unity Day, festive concerts were held in many cities of Russia today, but state activity did not stop there. It did not end there. Vladimir Putin, for example, spoke on Red Square with Patriarch Kirill, and then, apparently in honor of the holiday, signed two resident laws adopted before that by the Duma on year-round conscription, as well as on recruiting reservists into the army in peacetime. About what else happened on the Day of National Unity throughout Russia, in the story of Alina Dedkovskaya, Wildflowers of the Monks, The Morning Digs a Flower.
Russia is the power in this word.
Shots from different cities of Russia. Today, festive concerts were held in many of the main squares. This was how the National Unity Day was celebrated.
Glory to the warriors of his. We are Russians, God is with us.
Governor of the Vologda region Grigory Filomonov, he celebrated the holiday on a grand scale, opened a 9-meter monument to Ivan the Terrible.
Where, if not in Vologda, on the central Kremlin square, to stand this monument? I am glad that justice prevails. I'm glad that history puts everything in its place.
It was relatively calm in the main square of the country this afternoon. About 24 people, Putin in the company of Patriarch Kirill, and several other representatives of different faiths of youth organizations laid flowers. Journalists are a few meters away.
Do you have any questions for me or for the priests? The clergy? No, everything is most convenient for you. Thank you for coming today.
Then Putin went with the Patriarch to the Orthodox Russia exhibition, opened for the National Unity Day.
Just like with some of our other public holidays, there is, well, a more or less random date. There is something there from the era of the Troubles, the liberation of Moscow from the Polish occupation, something like that. It was all just invented, of course, no one was going to celebrate it.
At the beginning of the noughties, Patriarch Kirill, while still a metropolitan, was one of the initiators of the establishment of the National Unity Day. Officially, this holiday was established and made the weekend in the first term of Putin in the 5th year.
Every state needs holidays, and there are holidays in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And why Russia can't have its own holiday? Another thing is that Putin didn't like those holidays that have already been, he decided to start his own. Although it was, of course, the idea is just to get rid of the 7th of November. In principle, it's not a bad idea. Another thing is that we can simply cancel all the holidays in November and live in peace. There are enough other holidays in Russia. In the noughties, when all this was happening, he already looked like a huge rudiment. He was very much loved by the communists of the Communist Party, who were still in some kind of force at that time. And in order to snatch such a rug firm under their feet with a red banner, an absolutely artificial project was invented, called the Day of National Unity Day.
Today, a procession was also held in many cities of Russia: Vladivostok, Chita, Yekaterinburg, Krasnodar, and many others. Many politicians have written down personal congratulations on the National Unity Day.
The unity of all the people inhabiting our vast country is our strength. This is the key to our future victory. Happy National Unity Day.
Someone even admitted in his congratulations that he did not seem to fully understand the meaning of the holiday.
This is our holiday. It may not be very aware of, but we need those dates in our country. And now, on the 4th of November, this is a really good holiday, National Unity Day, when we are all united.
But most politicians have reduced their congratulations to the war with Ukraine.
And today, the residents of the Don, like the whole country, stood up for the fatherland. So it was 80 years ago, when our fathers and grandfathers, and great-grandfathers on his head, smashed hordes of Europeans, who fought against us under the banner of a swastika. This is what is happening today in the zone of a special military operation. Today, under the leadership of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of Russian President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, we are repelling a new threat from the West. This is one of the youngest, and at the same time the oldest public holidays, which reminds us that the unity of the Russian people is the key to victory. All the day of national unity. Unity is our strength. We are consolidated today as never before in any weather, regardless of party ticket in his pocket. And today the LPR is at the forefront of this unity for the country, for the president, for our speedy victory. This holiday reminds us of the power of national unity, of the need to unite against external challenges and internal threats to the statehood of Russia. The miscalculation of the collective West in its intentions to destroy our country is obvious. And shoulder to shoulder, thanks to the traditions of faith in perseverance and courage, we will win.
There were a lot of congratulations from the military themselves, participants in the invasion of Ukraine.
I'm a Kalmyk. I'm Russian. I'm a dude. I Bashkirs. I am a Tatar. I'm a Buryat. I'm a Darginian. There are many peoples, one homeland. Joy to share and wisdom for the benefit of all. Happiness with every happen. Trenches, hiking, sleepless days, the burden of fate is like steel on your chest. When the storm it hangs again, we do not retreat from the truth. We know behind the country. She will stand up for the right cause. One for all and all for one. Only together we are a force. The victory will be ours.
In Kursk, a concert was held in a military hospital. Children of the Suya Art School performed in front of the wounded soldiers.
Men, I am very glad that today I can meet with you like this and say a huge thank you for the trial. Since he had no sense of his, he began to acquire other meanings, at first tried to make mythology associated with the event 1613, but let's be honest, it did not stick. It was a very long time ago, it's not interesting to anyone, since the holiday was left without filling. Then they started looking for options, and when the war started, this is it, well, what could they do? They have an empty holiday. Whatever you want, stuff it with that. So they made it a mixture of the 9th of May and the 23rd of February.
Recorded, and their greetings loyal to Putin artists.
I congratulate all citizens of the great mighty, God-preserved country on the National Unity Day, and wish us all to unite. To rally against our enemies around our leaders, to engage not with ourselves, but with our country. At this difficult time for our motherland, this holiday is more relevant than ever. Let's live in friendship and harmony, as the Lord has bequeathed to us.
Some pro-Putin-minded musicians and bands have presented songs to date. Of course, a shaman who performed a song written by the senator of the Nizhny Novgorod region, Alexander Weinberg.
Fight.
There is another song, a little-known group of Taipin, as well as singers Lisa and Koroshulia, sang the composition together Did Not Break. However, the song was created with the support, which one is not specified, of the Presidential Fund for Cultural Initiatives. They beat him, but they didn't break him. They tried to burn him, but they didn't burn him. The police of the Chelyabinsk region shot their video for the song Russian World by Oleg Gazmanov.
Russian world, Russia. Now all this has turned into the background of what is happening in the country. It has turned into such a monotonous repetition of the same slogans that we are all united and becoming even more united. Look at what an amazing national unity we have. There seems to be no added value in these slogans themselves. Putin likes them very much.
National Unity Day was also celebrated in the occupied territories. Today, on the Day of National Unity, Putin also established the Day of Languages of Russia. It will be celebrated on the 8th of September and the Day of the Indigenous Peoples of Russia on the 30th of April. Writer Zakhar Pryalpin wrote the following quote on this occasion: Russia is an empire. Russia is the same multinational, and we will celebrate it. And that's fine. In the Belgorod region, a military and recidivist criminal kills people. It is known that he killed at least one man, probably killed the second, and also raped a woman. A man who returned from the war in Ukraine continues to hide, and in the border zone, where it is more difficult for Russian security forces to detect him. Alexandra Shvedchenko will tell you all the details. Sasha. Hi. Yes, Katya. Hello. Now I'm really going to share the details of this terrifying story. So, at the moment it is known that the serviceman Alexei Kostrykin most likely killed two people. His crimes in the Belgorod region began on October 28th. In the morning in the city of Shebekino, he attacked a woman who was walking with dogs. According to the Belgorod edition of Ashes, Kostrykin strangled her, beat her, but she, losing consciousness, was able to shoot from his machine gun. After the shot, the woman's neighbor ran out. He scared Kostrykin, and he disappeared. The police could not find anyone according to the description. October 29th, Kostrykin is already in the village of Novaya Volzhanka. It's nearby, went into the house of a married couple, raped the woman. The man was killed. Then, the criminal was detained and taken to the Belgorod commissariat, but the criminal escaped from under escort.
According to our information, criminal cases of negligence have now been opened against the escorts, because they began to search for even the escaped Kostrykin only after, well, according to our information, an hour later. And yes, this photo, which is distributed by the media and is actually in the orientation where he can see scratches on his face there. In fact, they were inflicted on him by the first victim of the attack.
Once after escaping from the commissariat of the offender fixed camera in Belgorod the underpass. It is also known that he used a stolen car. According to Nikita Parmenev, the editor-in-chief of the publication Ashes Belgorod, after the escape, Kostrykin returned to Novaya Volzhanka and, most likely, killed another man there. That is, at the moment Kostrykin has at least 4 victims. Most Kostrykin of 40 years. He was born in the Saratov region, but has been a resident of Kaliningrad for many years, and a serial rapist. In the 2002 year, together with his accomplices, he raped a woman, for which he was given 4 years in prison. In the year 2007, he received a new sentence, 11 years for theft and robbery, and in 2016, another 6.5 years for drug possession. This is the data of the publication Bladgorod, and at that time in the 2016 year, when he received a new sentence, he was still serving the previous one. When the man was released, and how he got to the front is unknown, but something else is known. According to the Ashes, Kostrykin was a guide in the Volchansk direction. He led the Russian military into positions by passing minefields, barriers, and other obstacles.
The zone in which he is hiding is a border zone. There are fighting going on there. That is, to fully carry out a full-fledged search operation, yes, as with dogs, yes. Comb the forest, as is usually done in such situations. At the same time, Kostrykin himself absolutely knows all the ways, exits there, detours of minefields, detours of some places of flights of Ukrainian drones, because he was, well, the so-called conductor in the Volchansk direction. In other words, in fact, he led Russian servicemen to positions in the Kharkiv region in this direction. That is, he knows every bush there, he knows where to hide, where to go around, where to get out there, yes, to the village, and so on and so forth. Therefore, in fact, the security forces are not able to detain him at the moment.
Well, here's what the current orientation on Alexei Kostrykin looks like.
Signs. In view of 40 to 45 years, rising about 180 centimeters of medium build, dressed in a military field uniform. I ask you to direct the personnel to detain Kostrykin a.v. to check the places of accommodation, public catering, bus and railway stations, taxi and truck stops, as well as unguarded construction sites, abandoned houses and other places of possible shelter.
The funeral of a man from Novaya Volzhanka, who was killed by Alexei Kostrykin, took place today. The funeral was attended by the governor of the Belgorod region, Vyacheslav Gladkov. On Saturday, Gladkov asked to increase the number of law enforcement officers involved in the search for the fugitive, to raise all self-defense units and voluntary people's squads. In addition, the governor asked the military police to strengthen patrols in the Shebekinsky and Belgorod districts, as well as in Belgorod itself.
All the resources that we have, we need to bring to interaction with the employees of the Ministry of Internal Affairs in order to strengthen or increase the number of people involved in the search, to assist and return the criminal to the hands of law enforcement agencies.
In the comments of the governor on Kontakt, residents of the region are outraged. They say the criminal has not yet been caught, and they do not even have light in some areas.
And laughter and sin. A man was killed again after Volzanki, where patrols, inspection groups, roadblocks, house inspection squads, all on chilly and relax. Devils walk around and calmly kill people. Where is the VP? Not a single curfew patrol in the city and district. There is no war. The killer is caught.
A resident of Shebekin spoke to us who says, "The locals are in fear. There are no military police and patrols on the streets."
The situation is such that we don't notice any special patrols on the street. We don't meet any military police either. The killer has been on the loose for several days. Yesterday, presumably, another person died by his hand in that Volzhanka. And this is a very scary, unpleasant situation. From acquaintances, knowing that the doors and gates have begun to close, but the fact that he is supposedly walking around in our Volga region. It's very scary.
Well, Kat, we will follow the development of this story. I hope that we will catch this criminal as soon as possible. Yes, but this is actually not an out-of-the-ordinary case. And we remember that a huge number of recidivists returning from the war, especially former prisoners, are killed, raped, cut, and so on. This is primarily the responsibility of the person who started this war in Ukraine, the person who allowed prisoners to be sent to the front. And now they are coming back and reaping the consequences of these decisions, of course, the locals, and not Vladimir Putin himself. Let's move on. From the detention center in Yekaterinburg, today released a street musician Eugene Mikhailov. He was the first to be arrested for supporting musicians of the St. Petersburg group Stop Time under the pseudonym Eugene Joy. The artist performed the same songs that are now called forbidden coins in Russia, but from MC porn films. For this, he served 14 days. At the exit from the pretrial detention center, the musicians were met by friends and relatives. Valeria Kirsanova will tell his story. Hello. Evgeny Mikhailov, also known as Eugene Joy, hugs his mother for a long time at the exit of the special reception, then puts on a warm jacket. How are you feeling?
Yes, this is normal. Was there hot water? There was hot water.
Before Yevgeny's exit from the special detention center, the mood was anxious. We constantly looked at passing cars, thought that maybe the police were about to arrive and detain Yevgeny again and take him to the department to draw up a protocol. But rearrest, as a group, the stop time has not happened.
I think it was hardly some kind of federal centralized instruction on how to deal with such musicians, it seems to me. That they mostly decided on the ground, so roughly guided by roughly understanding what Moscow wants. In general, well, in Yekaterinburg now they are quite tough with various manifestations of freedom-loving. There is a desire for democracy, for something else, that is, the region, of course, is no longer as liberal as it once was.
Now there are performances in jail in Eugene's biography. The radio didn't work there and the neighbors asked to sing. And his musical career began with publications in TikTok, home recordings with guitar and poems from work.
You walk through a cement factory, and at one moment such a train shakes from the cold. Morning yawns in my ear. Don't cry, my poor youth.
3 years ago, the musician began to sing on the street.
Abandons his love.
I even moved one of my concerts to the garages near the windows of the Ural Federal University for the sake of a girl.
One beautiful lady really wanted to get to my street performance, but because of the couples she did not succeed. My happiness is to be alone with you.
The repertoire Eugene was mainly a group of Nerves and Valentin Strikalo. I love it when random passers-by stop to sing with me, the musician wrote. And there were many times more such viewers after the footage of the performance of You Are a Soldier of a Coin was scattered on the internet. He told the Opinion Today publication.
The guys sang with me and supported me in every possible way. We all hugged after I performed. And in general, there was a lot of such a straight warm feedback. You're a soldier, and I wanted to take up your stitches. A sick heart, fix the stitch that beats on the mare.
In addition to her, the Swan Lake noise was later included in court, and in the case materials it was indicated that the protocol on petty hooliganism due to the obscenities of the song on Eugene was drawn up on the basis of a repost in the Telegram channel of journalist Dmitry Kolozev.
Of course, it's unpleasant for me, I won't hide it, but here you need to understand the context when this musician performed. After all, he publicly announced his performance in public on social networks. People came there, including journalists. They filmed him. He performed with an open face. That is, it was his rather courageous, bold step, a protest step. He made this choice when the recording was made. He was asked if it was possible to post a video with his face. He said yes, it was possible, that is, it was his conscious desire, and well. The discussion was about whether it was necessary to blur his face at the same time, so as not to help law enforcement agencies find him there, but it seems to me that when a person made such a conscious choice, it would be wrong to redo this choice for him.
I was inspired to make an election, and became an example of courage for the musician, he said the day before his arrest.
Well, the question is, why do we need music if they don't let us perform it? This is the first one. And the second thing is that it's terribly scary very much, but I want not to be afraid more than I am afraid.
And the street artist himself inspired the musicians who were his idols. This is Berlin, the concert of the band Casta.
Zhenya is always wrong. We send support, and this dust will end sooner or later. If other musicians had been detained, we would have supported them. That is, it's our responsibility. That is, having left, and thereby retaining the opportunity to speak freely, and speak honestly, well, we consider it our duty.
During these 14 days, dozens of letters were written to Eugene. He replied, "Thank you that I'm not alone." Fans handed over to prison a collection of Chekhov's humorous stories, sheet music, and a Yekaterinburg artist and activist who emigrated to the United States. A portrait of Eugene. I am a political person myself. I ran as a candidate for deputy in Yekaterinburg. Was put in a special detention center on election day in this one, in which Zhenya was serving his sentence. It stirred me up. That's why I drew it. Agreed with the guys from Yekaterinburg. I won't mention their names, because I understand what time and the guys passed. The Siloviki were inspired by the musician's repertoire to address the participant of the invasion of Ukraine. A certain Egor Gorshunov confirmed that the words of the song "You Are a Soldier" discredit the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and wrote a statement. So Eugene got a second protocol.
It is very important for the state to show that this is, as it were, not a repression that the authorities carried out, but it is being done in the interests of society. That is, there is some part of society, in the person of a veteran of the SFO, who saw there, was indignant, wrote a certain statement there or complained, or when asked at least, he said that it offends him, he is dissatisfied. And as if in the interests of this part of society, we will plant this musician. Not because the authorities are so evil and want to see a teenager in prison, yes, but because he has prevented someone in society. But this, of course, is absolute guile. It is clear how such indications appear in general. Of course, in this case people are treated as a tool.
So far, for street performances in support of stop time, they have been detained only in the Urals and in St. Petersburg. Yesterday in Perm, a court arrested 20-year-old singer Ekaterina Romanova for 7 days. On the 25th of October, the members of the Restart group, the musicians, turned out to be minors, and they were released without a protocol. Eugene Joy, to the question what he would do if released, he answered like this.
Of course I will. It will work, but it will work and write music. I would like the Stop Time group and other guys, and Zhenya Joy, to be top-liners at a big concert on Red Square on the ruins of Putinism, so that these guys sing at the funeral of the system.
Well, it's time for the Foreign Affairs Caricade program on the RAIN TV channel. We will talk about global international events and phenomena. Let's get started. Russian opposition leader and former coordinator of Open Russia, Egor Rogov, has been arrested in Poland. However, this is only an external description of Rogov's activities. According to local media, The man confessed to the security forces that he cooperated with the Russian FSB. Rogova and his wife Irina, accused of spying. They face from 8 years to life imprisonment. According to the investigation, Rogov, who moved to Poland in 2000, collected information about anti-war activists, organizations helping Russian immigrants, and about the work of the Polish Foreign Ministry. According to the police, it was possible to reach him after a parcel with elements of an explosive device was found, addressed to this very Rogov. At the same time, Russian special services are changing their tactics in Europe, the insider writes. If earlier intelligence mainly worked through agents operating in Europe under false names, now the special services are moving to active hybrid warfare and psych-operations, but already operating from the territory of Russia. To our airwaves connected Christo Grozov, an investigative journalist, Darshil and insider. Christ, hello.
Hello, Irina.
I thank you for taking the time. First of all, I want to ask about this young man who infiltrated the opposition anti-war structures in order to transmit information where it should be. But why am I trying to understand? Is there really some kind of closed part of the activity, for example, Open Russia, which the FSB was so interested in? How does it all work?
And they had such an efficiency to infiltrate a position into any position in order, first of all, to get information from there. Even video fixation, photos and so on. All this is considered their capital when they report up there that they were able to do it. We wrote last year about such successful attempts and semi-successful attempts by the GRU. It is, by the way, the representatives of this terrible department to 9 of the Olympics, this case of sabotage murders, which we will also talk about today, because this is our new investigation. It was they who were able to introduce their representative to Free Russia, and he visited, filmed, posted and so on for 4 years. Therefore, it is quite logical that the FSB does this too. And it is not necessary that for each such embedded, there will be some tasks to perform there, well, information theft or something more kinetic, that is, an attack on someone, but it reads like an agent network, which is very important to them. And once again, it is necessary to look here even firm within the kitchen of such a bureau of bureaucracy between the GRU. And this is competition for merit, and they certainly create their own competitive networks, and then prove that they are better even in this regard.
I wonder what threatens the presence of such a person in this or that organization. Just a huge number of anti-war initiatives have been created in Europe after the start of a full-scale invasion. All sorts of groups of people unite, organize their own events. Journalists, again, journalistic communities. How does the presence of, for example, such a St. Cossack affect their work and their activities? I apologize for the wording.
And this is a rather dangerous form of accumulation of information on the part of the FSB. There have been cases when people have left Russia because, for example, their relatives have children studying abroad there. Then there are people who travel from Russia under the guise of immigration, under the guise in order to avoid mobilization. But at private parties or some events in New York, London, Warsaw, they open their minds a lot more and start criticizing the military operation, the war, criticizing the regime there. This is transmitted back by such Cossacks, and then when they return to Russia, they begin to have a problem. There have been such cases. I don't want to talk more specifically, because I don't want to threaten such innocent people anymore. But such cases were exactly on a tip from Cossacks like this.
Wow. Krista, let's talk about your investigation, which came out today, about how the style of work of the main intelligence agency in the West is changing, in fact, the FSB and the FSB unit here in Europe. What made actually the Russian security forces and intelligence agencies to change the form and format?
Interestingly, I recently had a conversation with one representative of the special services during an interview, which he agreed to, right? And to the same question that you ask me, why has your job changed? Why don't you, well, use Basharev and Petrov like they used to? He rolled back, well, partly ironically, partly somehow with an accusation, but it's because of you. Because you lit up so many agents that they can't travel anymore. And although this is a bit of an exaggeration, the reason here is really that it used to be possible for such undercover agents to travel around the world for 15 years. Especially after the 8th year, when this work of such sabotage spy units of the GRU became more frequent, well, about 70-80 of such spies began to constantly travel around the world, the Basharev of which there were only 2 of them. But we came out there at least 50 of them and no one noticed them. No one even noticed before we started exposing a series of such spies from afar, both with insiders and with Spiegel's colleagues, and pointing out what is common among all books. They all have a white biography, which they never appeared there at all, as if they were born in Russian databases when they were 30 years old. They have all serial passports from the same series, and so on and so on. We started writing this. The GRU began to think about it somehow, and change its strategy, and began to issue new passports to the same spies, which are no longer not. But it was too late, because then the Western intelligence services already understood and knew how to calculate them. The example that we give today in our investigation is about one of these, who was previously detected by traveling under such passports. He was able to infiltrate a very structure defining a company in Austria that is engaged in water sensation. Of course, it's scary to think at all what could have done a mountain if they were able to infiltrate for a long time. And they really participate in this process all over Europe. But our investigation, and the fact that the GRU began to worry whether all these agents were not disclosed, forced them to wrap it in Russia. And here his career further shows that a new strategy in the mountain and partially FSB. They can no longer send these people abroad because they are considered burned assets. But I can use them from Russia to recruit new foreign agents. By the way, mostly foreign agents, we are preparing a new investigation, which we will tell in detail about this. And for that, they're embedded in such structures academic in nature, where they can have access to such foreign young people to recruit. This is usually an academic structure like the Pushkin Institute of the Russian language there, in which this person we are writing about today, Sergei Kanonov, has infiltrated, and then began to consider where we can find more. Where we are likely to find such sympathetic students in our country, our regime. And he writes right there, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Belarus and Kyrgyzstan, these are the countries they are targeting. So here is a new technique it is being used.
For Christ's sake, I'm sorry. The new technique is what when you write about psychoperations and cyber attacks, as far as I understand from the text. This is also a very popular method of influencing and collecting information. Can you describe in a nutshell what it means?
First, there must always accept that what they are doing on the words and what they really do. Most of these former agents of Department 29155 are now actually there 90% of their time engaged in psychoperations. They really prepare theses, which are then distributed by other trolls there, by Tor farms, to the Western media. That's how to shake society, how to create chaos, how to make societies afraid of tomorrow. Here we wrote about this strategy. They are creating exactly such networks to spread false information. And since they have experience in creating real offline such terrible events as sabotage and so on, they are more logical, so they were given this building. They can describe and create such fears much more convincingly than just if there was some ordinary troll or spshnik who does not know how to create terror. But the second 10%, they are scarier, because in addition to working with these criminals, they are also looking for candidates to commit such terrorist attacks. Because honestly, I can't believe the people who were involved in earlier attacks and specialty of their murders poisoning bang. That they were given the task well, the only thing to do fake news, and it's not their specialty. Therefore, this communication with these young students that they are recruiting, I think it's still scarier. They are preparing them for something more scary, because these people can then travel and be in places where they could have been before.
Christ, it sounds very scary, but it's cool that you do such investigations. Thank you for this information, and we are waiting for the next ones. Christo Grozov, investigative journalist, Der Spiegel, and for Insider. The Rain TV channel is on the air. Let's move on. Today, New York is electing a mayor, and this is not a local story about a mayor with the functions of a business executive. This is a story about radicalization, with a high degree of probability. An extreme left-wing politician, 34-year-old Zoran Mamdani, will win here. Mamdani proudly calls himself a Democrat socialist, which causes rejection even among his colleagues in the Democratic Party, more moderate and less inflexible, not to mention the Republicans and President Donald Trump. The head of the American state threatens to cut funding for New York from the federal budget if Mamdani wins the mayoral election. Trump describes Mamdani as nothing but a candidate from the Communist Party and scares the residents of the city with a social and economic catastrophe. And here, for example, there is a quote from Trump.
I would rather see the victory of a Democrat with a successful history of victories behind him than communists without experience, with a track record of complete failures.
You are being criticized for populism and unfulfilled promises like freezing rents or reducing the cost of travel on city buses. For his youth and lack of experience, he had just turned 34. For trying to build socialism despite the lessons of history. In addition, many people do not see the notes of anti-Semitism in Mamdani's eyes, and they see it for good reason. The politician has Indian-Ugandan roots. He was born in Uganda, professes Islam. He actively criticizes Israel, supports Palestine, and with great difficulty condemns Hamas terrorists. On the Russian street of New York, forecasts sound in the spirit that after the reign of Mamdani, the city will perish. Well, let's discuss it. Alexander Jeans, a writer, is in touch with us. I am very glad to see you at last, Alexander. Thank you very much. I want to ask you right away why Russian-speaking people, including people living far outside of New York, are so afraid of this candidate. What do you think?
Well, first of all, hello Katya, glad to see you. Secondly, it is obviously not the only people who are afraid of Russian immigrants Madani. I'm afraid, for example, in Maiden too, although I do not always share the opinion of the Russian street. The fact is that I have been living in New York for a long time, and Mamdani recently, because I am much older than him. I know what New York was like when I came to New York in '77. 1 in 6 people in New York has been on the benefits themselves. It was the nadir of New York, its lowest point, when unemployment was 17%, inflation was 17%. Crime was monstrous. I saw all this with my own eyes, unlike Mamdani. I know that he will lead the city exactly to the position in which I found him. And it's very sad that under mayors like Bloomberg, New York has flourished. What will happen next? The thing is that the Modens are not local elections, they are all-American elections. Brad Stevens, my favorite columnist for the New York Times, wrote that if Mamdani wins this race, the Democrats will not win the elections for 10 years because in the eyes of the whole of America, they will be people who supported a socialist, people who supported an absolutely irresponsible candidate, a populist. And this means that the elections of the 26th year of extraordinarily important will be lost. It means that all this is playing on Trump's card, and it means that Mamdani, the man who leads New York to disaster, and the Democratic Party to the same place.
Yes, I saw that Barack Obama, with great difficulty, in general, eventually came to the support of Zoran Mamdani, the leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, and the leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate, somehow thought for a long time before officially supporting him in these elections, although he won in the primaries. But do you believe maybe that these romantic thoughts of Mamdani's zone are some kind of very sincere, and that he really believes that it is possible to build socialism in a single city, and maybe thanks to his honest aspiration, if they are like that, something will turn out?
This does not resemble the Bolsheviks. That is, fashion does not go by.
Much like the Bolsheviks.
The thing is, I am. The fact is that I know what he will do. The fact is that I have already distinguished himself. He supported crimes against New York. What was the crime? A few years ago, Amazon was the largest corporation in America, which a huge number of people work for Amazon. They wanted to build a headquarters in Queens. Approximately where we, Katya, worked with you in RV. It's such a dreary industrial area, and they wanted to build a headquarters there, build schools, improve the area, build new homes for their employees. It was a gift for New York. And the local authorities said no, they don't need it. Mondani supported this protest against Amazon. Why? Because they said that let Amazon build, but the local authorities, that is their own, will recruit personnel for Amazon. Here Amazon said, no, we do not need. Imagine some kind of loss for New York. How much taxes were lost, the city lost. I saw what he was doing. That's exactly what he will do next. Well, for example, it will freeze the rent. What does this mean? When apartments are not rented, they are destroyed. And this will mean that the urban structure will fall into disrepair, and I saw this when, say, houses were boarded up in the Bronx. And there were such cardboard boxes with cats painted on the windows, because supposedly people lived there. I have seen these empty houses, I have seen burned down houses in Harlem, and I have seen all this. And the people who vote for Mamdani, mostly young people. They don't know what socialism is, because the Cold War ended long ago, and they don't know, they have nothing to compare it with. And all these romantic expectations, as you say, are not just speculation. This is a crime against the residents of New York, which they do not yet know about. But he will soon guess, because, unfortunately, I am sure that Mundane will win the election.
Yes, he will win, of course. He has excellent figures. Listen, I'm probably going to ask you a direct question. Do you think that Zoran Mundane is an anti-Semite?
Of course I do. When they say that he is an anti-Zionist, it means that he is an anti-Semite who is called by another name. When asked about the 11th of September, he said it was a terrible blow to the Muslims. In other words, the fact that several thousand people died, of course, is terrible. But it's not as scary as the fact that Islamophobia began after that, as he calls it, and by the way, I didn't notice any Islamophobia on September 11th in New York, and now I don't see it. It's here I see the anti-Semitism in New York, and see all the demonstration of the Palestinians. And was seen as possessed screamed in defense of Palestine students at Columbia University, with which I am familiar unfortunately. I've seen it all, and when asked 100 times about the fact that he supports the global jihad, every time he spoke, but I'm not at all. But not like that, but not right away. No, I do not support. But he has never openly opposed Hamas. He never said that terrorists are outright evil. And yes, it is, of course, 1 million Muslims in New York, and vote for Madani. It is much more interesting that 3 million Jews of whom are in New York, who many vote for Madani. This, of course, is a special case.
But it's not that they are Jews.
Yes, it's not that they are Jews, it's that they are leftists who are progressives, who ruined the Democratic Party, brought Trump to power, and deprived him of the opportunity to take revenge on the elections of the 26th year. That's what Madani's election means.
Alexander, but this also applies to both sides. Yes, the radicals on the right are the radicals on the left of another opponent. Well, if you look at Andrew Aum, who is now an opponent with Amdani Damage, he is a very weak candidate. He is terribly unpopular, not to mention Curtis Plum, who represents the Republican Party. There simply was no chance from the very beginning. But the request as if there is such a Zoran Mundane, on such a Donald Trump from different sides. After all, it's people, yes, society, as if they gave birth to such candidates or not.
You know, first of all, I don't agree with you about the Coma. Coma is a person with a lot of experience. And I always imagined that you need to know something to run the city. He has a huge experience, and Mamdane has all of his experience can be recorded on a specific rapper. Coma is a normal candidate. I would vote for him, but that's not the point. I know exactly what you're talking about. The fact is that the left progressives brought Trump to power, and Trump brought the left progressives to power. It's a snake that bit its tail. This is all terrible, and of course, we lack Democrats, and categorically lack a leader like, for example, Clinton. I'm not talking about John Kennedy, but this need for centrism is absolutely amazing. It is extremely necessary. The fact is that the analysis of statistical analysis, the analysis of very serious scientists shows that the majority of Americans on both the left and the right do not adhere to party ideology. They adhere to centrism. They are trying to find a candidate who would be a centrist. That's how I am. I miss the party. I'm missing this in the middle which I could rely. I am partisan homeless, politically homeless. And such politically homeless people are the majority in America. Therefore, it is all the more terrible that people like Trump or Madan win.
Thank you very much for this conversation. Alexander Genis, writer on the Dozhd TV channel. See you soon, I hope. And we're moving on. The time of the column on the Rain TV channel. Sergei Lavrov is tired. The Financial Times newspaper writes, Western publications describe the state of the Russian minister as anger, intransigence, stubbornness, as if recently the head of Russian diplomacy finally said goodbye to diplomacy, as well as to all illusions, and decided not to pretend anymore, not to cheat, not to play decent relations with opponents, not to smile to his 75 of them. He spent 21 years in the minister's chair. Lavrov seems to have realized that, from the once respected everywhere a recognized professional, he turned into sad conductor of Putin's ideas. Sergei Lavrov knows very well that these ideas are false, but since his soul has already been sold to the devil, he continues to bend the party line with particular frenzy, becoming more Putinish than Putin. Sergei Lavrov is undoubtedly a dramatic figure. Wikipedia will write about him years later as the same foreign minister who buried Russian diplomacy with his own hands. During the war with Ukraine, his recent call with his colleague from Washington, Rubio, actually disrupted the meeting between Putin and Trump in Budapest. And this is too much even for the Kremlin chief. Putin did not order this. The fact is that in mid-October, the American president agreed with Putin to meet in Hungary. A few days later, the Russian Foreign Ministry sent a memorandum to Washington, demanding the elimination of the root causes of the conflict, and again, territorial concessions, a sharp reduction in the armed forces of Ukraine, and guarantees of non-entry into NATO were on the list. Against the background of the preparation of negotiations in Budapest, the White House did not see any constructive, no retreat from previous positions. And then there was a telephone conversation between Lavrov and the US Secretary of State, after which Rubio reported to Trump, Moscow is not ready for dialogue, there will be no concessions. After that, the head of the White House canceled everything, and Peskov now shrugs it off, saying that he didn't really want to.
Hypothetically, I think it is possible, but at the moment it is not necessary.
In the US, Russia's position was expected to soften. Trump was ready to be satisfied with a minimal movement towards. Lavrov's task, as I imagined it, was to stall for time, to hang noodles on Rubio's ears, to talk about readiness for peace and nuances, but instead, the Americans got an official in a bad mood. According to the Financial Times, officials in America were literally amazed by Lavrov's inflexibility. And by the way, in September of this year, during a short meeting with Rubio, he made equally uncompromising statements. For example, he began to claim that Ukraine is in the power of the Nazis. Such tales have not impressed even Orban, but Lavrov deliberately went to the aggravation. Here is an important quote from the article.
Lavrov is clearly tired and seems to think he has more important things to do than meet or interact with the United States. Regardless of what President Putin wants, a source familiar with the situation said.
The Kremlin does not welcome such publications. Direct indications that it was Lavrov who disrupted the talks between Putin and Trump apparently caused dissatisfaction with the high authorities. Therefore, through a leak in the newspaper Kommersant, the Foreign Ministry is justified.
We have not departed and do not depart from the understandings reached by the presidents in Alaska. It is the United States that is drifting in zigzags, moving closer to the positions of the European Union and Ukraine. The interlocutor of Kommersant said.
Translated into Russian, the Foreign Ministry says, there was no Otsabutina. Everything was within the tonality set by Putin. Interestingly, near the Kremlin anonymous channel, Nesiger predicts almost the resignation Lavrov. Well, that Shoigu can be removed from office, so no one is indispensable. Allegedly, the foreign minister had a serious conversation with Putin, and some Kremlin officials even accused Lavrov of sabotage, after which Kirill Dmitriev privately flew to the United States. We talked about this coming visit in detail in the last program.
Lavrov is clearly depressed now. He found himself in the epicenter of intrigue, and many believe that Lavrov repeats the path of Shoigu. He clearly lost the location of Putin and looks like a weak element. The Russian Foreign Ministry is forced to make public leaks, proving its innocence.
Propaganda makes it clear that, in general, Putin does not take the same radical position as his minister. It looks like a signal to Donald Trump. They say, "Do not listen to Lavrov, let's meet in Budapest." Against this background, the activity of the already mentioned Kirill Dmitriev is striking. According to rumors, Lavrov can't stand Putin's special representative. Addition, the agency in April wrote that Putin gave the go-ahead to negotiate with Washington, actually two teams, a quote, which do not get on with each other and meeting in some conflict because of their place at the table. According to journalists, Putin deliberately did not tell his foreign minister about Dmitriev's participation in Saudi meetings.
Lavrov was very surprised to see 3 chairs from the Russian side in the meeting room, the source says. According to him, when it was explained to the minister that the 3rd chair was for Dmitriev, he pushed the chair away from the table, with the words, "If he wants to participate, let Vladimir Vladimirovich tell me about it."
As a result, Dmitriev still found himself at the table. By the way, Nezigar's source confirms that Lavrov is really tired and probably has more detractors in the Kremlin. It could be true. Let's see how Sergei Lavrov spoke before the publication of the Financial Times just a week ago, just against the background of the disruption of the meeting in Budapest. The Russian minister demands a guarantee of the outcome of the negotiations and accuses the American side of violating the preliminary agreement. They say that Witkov also brought a proposal from the White House to Moscow. Putin liked them, and exactly they were discussed in Alaska. Putin is ready to go further, and Trump, under pressure from the Europeans, is showing indecision.
Of course, it was surprising that suddenly President Trump again left 4 positions that, it would seem, have been worked out for a long time.
The Europeans and Zelensky are to blame for everything. But Trump is also a weak sketch. We draw a conclusion from Lavrov's statement. Does he accurately express Putin's position specifically at this stage? The answer is not obvious. During the war, Sergei Lavrov repeatedly got into history. The bewilderment of the world community was caused by his thesis that Jewish blood flowed in Hitler's veins. This is May 2022 year.
I'm afraid to make a mistake, but in my opinion, Hitler also had Jewish blood. It means absolutely nothing. And we have long heard the wise Jewish people who say that the most ardent anti-Semites are usually Jews.
Thus, the diplomat tried to justify his own crooked thesis that Vladimir Zelensky's Jewish origin does not prevent him from calling the Ukrainian leadership Nazi. But it turned out badly. The head of the memorial complex Yad Vashem called these statements the blood libel. The Israeli foreign minister said Minister Lavrov's comments were inexcusable and outrageous. The Russian ambassador was summoned to the Israeli foreign ministry. In March of the 23rd year, Sergei Lavrov was publicly ridiculed at a conference in India. The minister tried to tell the audience that it was not Russia that started the war in Ukraine, but quite the opposite.
You know, the war that we are trying to stop, and that was started against us with our hands. The Ukrainian people. Of course, it affected. It influenced Russian politics.
Throughout the war years, Lavrov consistently harshly scolds the West and stubbornly repeats nonsense about, as he says, the Kiev regime. His rhetoric has changed in recent months, except that now Russia's main enemy is the European Union and America is slightly pushed aside. But in general, the minister's line of thought is straight as an arrow. Before his speeches, experienced journalists learned to quote the predictable Lavrov almost verbatim in advance.
The principle of non-use of force and threat of force has also been repeatedly flouted by the West. Tragedies turned into the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, the invasion of the US-led coalition in Iraq. The West is not used to observing the principle of non-interference in internal affairs. The color revolutions have become a sad phenomenon of our time. The Ukrainian regime is allowed everything, including terrorist attacks against politicians and journalists, torture, and extrajudicial executions. Russia, as President Putin has repeatedly stressed, has been and remains open to negotiations to eliminate the root causes of the conflict from the very beginning.
It is known that Sergei Lavrov, who many years ago deserved the trust of the first person, never, however, entered Putin's inner circle. He, according to trustworthy sources, did not know about Putin's plan to start a war until the very last moment. According to the Western press, the foreign minister received a call on the 24th of February around 1 o'clock in the morning, with a message about Putin's decision to launch an invasion. This decision took Lavrov by surprise. Back in the 23rd year, the Financial Times wrote, keeping Lavrov in the dark was commonplace for Putin, who tended to concentrate foreign policy decision-making in the hands of a handful of proxies, even when it undermined Russia's diplomatic efforts. End quote. I assume that the minister was offended then. Perhaps there was even some struggle going on inside him, as a result of which a choice was made in favor of comfort and hypocrisy. Lavrov is the record holder for the longest stay in the chair of the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry. Otherwise, he, like others, takes advantage of the position. More than one investigation has been published about the chic life of the minister. Newsweek magazine published a text about the fall of Sergei Lavrov 2 years ago. That's how they put it. And so the expert on Russia, Mark Galeotti, assesses the position of the diplomat.
In a sense, he can now be called a prisoner of the system. Although it is difficult to feel special sympathy for a person in his position. On the one hand, the job of a diplomat is to lie for the sake of his country. However, how and when you lie makes a huge difference. Lavrov paid a terrible price in terms of his authority.
Lavrov's authority at the beginning of his career in the leadership of the foreign ministry was enormous. As former foreign minister Andrei Kozyrev tells RAIN, even Lavrov's political opponents respected him, and when Lavrov spoke, the others were silent and listened attentively. He was a recognized subtle diplomat who worked in the interests of Russia, but at the same time knew how to listen to others. He was considered charming, humane, and witty. The phrase about morons thrown in the 2015 "I'm sorry" went into memes and became popular. In the 2017, Lavrov talks about relations with the United States, like, "We don't want to quarrel, ready to be friends, but..."
But, as you know, it takes two to tango. So far, in my opinion, our American partners are performing individual breakdancing over and over again.
It's funny that it takes two to tango. This is one of Donald Trump's favorite phrases. Lavrov clearly knew something. Just kidding. In the 2015, Lavrov spoke about the annexation of Crimea. These were the words he used to describe the situation.
The self-determination of the people has happened, and self-determination on the basis of centuries-old history can certainly be laughed at. Well, then just someone will enjoy it. Laughter is also said to prolong life.
Then Lavrov was kinder and thinner, smiling. Someone will say that he behaved more effectively then, like a diplomat. But interestingly, he didn't know about the plan to seize the Ukrainian peninsula either. According to Newsweek, the foreign minister did not participate in the planning and decision-making on the annexation of Crimea. But nothing, he laughed it off. He defended Putin, stayed in the chair. To this day, there is no trace of his charm and humanity. Morons were replaced by outright rudeness, including two journalists. Rudeness not funny, causing only a feeling of awkwardness. This is a video from the summit in Dushanbe, May 22nd.
Mr. Lavrov, may I ask a question from representatives of foreign media? But they wouldn't let us in. They said that on your behalf.
And I was allowed to go. Peacocks live on the territory of the residents of the government of Tajikistan, so Lavrov sent a journalist to the peacocks. The Russian foreign minister was known for writing poetry. I will not judge their quality, but this touch to the portrait of the diplomat seemed to many cute, even touching. Unlike other officials, Sergei Lavrov, with his creativity, seemed to be more alive, more able to feel for his 75th birthday. In March of this year, the foreign ministry released a video in which various famous people read the poems of the honored minister. In this video, Mikhalkov and Kandelaki and Rastorgev and Mashkov and Solovyev, who is not there, the list is long, of the foreigners, the director Emir Kusturica and Karen Neisel, the former Austrian foreign minister, are all.
For others, instead of words, it turned out to be lies and lies.
Lebedev and Pushkin and Chubchik tamed the country. What could be a more vivid illustration of the portrait of a minister who failed his mission? Sergei Lavrov, who speaks English, worked at the UN in New York, believed in civilization and in establishing relations with the West, remained at the trough with Costa Rica, and a woman who danced with Putin once at her own wedding. She is not particularly remarkable in anything else. This is his own choice, the choice of Lavrov. Rumors that Sergei Lavrov is tired of the hard work of the foreign minister have been going around for a long time. Every now and then, there are plums about the imminent and inevitable resignation. But so far, Lavrov, who has proven his loyalty, remains in place. If this time the assumptions about the Kremlin's discontent turn out to be correct, it will be a sensation. Well, just because everyone got used to Lavrov for a long time, as they got used to Putin's coughing or Putin's gait. And besides, what will happen to Maria Zakharova? The new minister, say Kirill Dmitriev, will probably want to appoint his own press secretary, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. For 25 years in power, Putin has proved that he protects his confidants and does not like to change the old guard for new people. But he does it when he is irritated to the highest degree, or when his person turns out to be unable to work properly, gets tired, gets angry, and loses vigilance. By the way, Sergei Lavrov is older than Vladimir Putin. Revolut Bank massively blocks the accounts of users from Russia who have not submitted data on a residence permit to the organization. The bank explains its actions by the need to comply with the requirements established by the recently adopted 19th package of sanctions against Russia. However, after the problem was widely discussed in the media, the bank unfroze some of the functions for blocked accounts. Now their owners can, for example, pay with cards. However, other functionality is still unavailable to them. This weekend, an anti-war committee conference was held in Brussels. Politician Dmitry Gudkov, during the panel discussion, asked the special rapporteur on cooperation with the Russian Democratic Forces Eric Cross. And we sent the same question to the organizers of the conference for transmission to Cross. So, together with Dmitry Gudkov, we would like to know what to do for Russians who have their bank accounts blocked. And that's what the European politician answered us.
I think it's a very ambitious goal to try to change the rules of the European banking system using our platform. Many countries in Europe, as well as many European citizens themselves, suffer because of it. Of course, this is a specific problem that has arisen among political refugees from Russia. It should be carefully considered separately. But we need to start with the formation of the platform itself. People need to get to work first, and then we'll see.
Well, as if we didn't get a clear answer. At least yes, the conference participants as a whole urge not to treat Russia's representation in PACE as a magic wand capable of solving all the problems of Russians in emigration. Such sticks, we know, do not exist in nature. Dmitry Gudkov describes it like this in these words: the opposition will have a platform that will make it easier and louder to talk about problems in the presence of a large number of officials and deputies of the European Union, while now the discussion of such issues and problems takes place mainly on the sidelines and mostly one-on-one with European politicians. But back to the Revolut Bank. In the vast majority of cases, Russians who are waiting for a residence permit or are going through the procedure of its extension have faced problems. But in at least 5 cases, those who already have a residence permit have faced blocking. This was told in the ARC project. He is engaged in helping those who have left Russia. They also sent a letter to the European Commission demanding to explain the reasons for the blockages. Because there is no provision in the 19th package of sanctions that would directly prohibit Russians without a residence permit from having accounts in new banks. Experts believe that the reason for the sudden freezes could be the excessive caution of the lawyers of the Revolut company. However, concerns are caused by the fact that, for example, other European banks have already begun to follow the Revel. On the eve it became known that the German commercial bank froze the account of a Russian citizen who is in the country on a long-term visa D, and the Babit and Bayou crypto exchange in turn has stopped opening accounts even for those Russians who have a European residence permit. And a new analysis of propaganda from Lucy Green has been released on the YouTube channel of Rain. A descendant of Nicholas I visited the front. Artemy Lebedev is a fan of Zemfira, and Tsargrad stands up for Z-blogger Tatiana Mantian, who is included in the register of extremists and terrorists. Watch, comment, and share with your friends. Lebedev continues the war with Roskomnadzor, the doctrine of distortion from Norkin. Tsargrad stands like a mountain of Zamontian. What? Yes. And where did the descendant of Nicholas I lose his Russianness? And now everyone amicably goes to YouTube to watch the new issue of Fantastic Creatures, and prints comments on this video with their paws. Because I read them all, and they are very important to me. According to what principle the authorities of European countries select worthy and unworthy asylum? Daniel's story is absolutely cinematic. I would even say scary. A young man, a citizen of Russia, jumps out of the Adler-Kaliningrad train, turns out to be on the territory of Lithuania. In order not to get into the ranks of the Russian army, Vilnius does not want to accept him, and fearing deportation to his homeland, Daniel flees to Finland, but they do not find support there either. We talked to Daniel a couple of hours ago. Daniel, hello. Tell us about yourself in a nutshell to begin with.
My name is Daniel. I am 21 years old. I escaped from the Russian Federation because I do not want to participate in the war that my country has unleashed.
Tell us at what point and why did you decide to run? How did it happen?
I decided to do this last year, when my deferral from the army burned out and I had no ways to avoid serving in the army.
You received a summons from what I understand.
Yes.
When were you supposed to report to the military enlistment office?
In March 2025 year.
And at what point did you decide to take that train?
In June, when I was already banned from leaving the country. I realized that it was dangerous to give myself to me, and therefore chose this method.
And why exactly this method? He's extremely risky, isn't he, Daniel? Agree? Yes, jumping out of a train at full speed on the territory of a foreign state is an unexpected move, to put it mildly. Tell us what you thought. Why did you choose this path?
I saw this option for myself because I worked in the railway industry and rode this train. Since I was much more afraid of crossing borders, I had to take this step in order not to stay in Russia.
Tell us, what did you experience? What did you think about when you jumped off the train?
I thought that if I succeed, then I will survive and not fight.
Tell me, but surely there are young people in your environment who have agreed to join the army and fight in Ukraine. And why are you fundamentally against it?
Because this is not my war, and I'm taking my life into my own hands.
Yeah. And let me ask you about how they perceived it first in Lithuania. Why do you think the Lithuanian authorities considered you not trustworthy enough to give you asylum? How would you respond to those who saw you as a threat?
On June 17th, when I got off this train, the Lithuanian authorities literally immediately published my personal data. A photo from my passport, thereby violating Article 6 of the Lithuanian Personal Data Law. This scared me very much, and I became even more convinced that Lithuania is not a safe country for me in which I can forgive protection. As a result, I was forced to flee to Finland, and on the evening of June 17th, I surrendered to the police there. On the 18th of June, I requested international protection on the territory of Finland and was awaiting a decision. And the Lithuanian authorities slandered me, called me a saboteur, a Russian spy, and imitated the search with the involvement of helicopters, dogs and drones, thereby arranging some kind of show.
Well, why did they do it? How would you explain it to the Lithuanian authorities? Imagine that officials are watching our conversation right now. What would you tell them?
I think that it is not necessary to brand every citizen of Russia or Belarus as a potential saboteur and a threat to national security. I mean, if you want to stop the war, you have to help people like me.
What awaits you in Russia in case of deportation?
I think that most likely imprisonment and further sending to war.
And what about Finland? Please explain why you are not given asylum in Finland. And as far as I understand, they also want to deport you. What is your current status in Finland?
In September of this year, the Finnish Migration Service decided that since I entered the territory of the European Union through Lithuania, according to the Dublin regulations, I need to go there and apply for asylum there. That is, in the news of the latter, there is a little wrong with the wording of the pins refused to consider the application for asylum. And as an additional reason, I applied the fact that Lithuania cannot fairly and objectively assess my situation. So I need to stay in Finland. But the Finns ignored it. And I believe that if I go to Lithuania, it will make me very, very bad, and I have no chance to prove that I am not a saboteur or a spy.
Tell me, has anyone talked to you, Daniel? I would just try to understand. But here is someone from Lithuanian officials who conducted conversations with you, asked you questions, tried to investigate your, I don't know, beliefs, to study your biography. Did something like that happen to you?
No, the harassment continued all this time, and they did not even try to figure out the situation in which I am, and who I am in general. What do you plan to do next? I plan to get the suspension of my expulsion to Lithuania to ensure that my case is considered in Finland, in the country where I applied for international protection for the first time. And I also want to note that if I really posed some kind of threat to the European Union, I would not be talking to you right now. The Finnish special services have checked me for a long time.
Well, Daniel, thank you very much for this conversation, and I hope that we will meet again on the Rhine. It was a citizen of the Russian Federation, 21-year-old Daniel, who is waiting for a decision from the Finnish authorities. But did he do the right thing by deciding to flee Russia in this way? We asked human rights activist Ivan Chuviliev about this, an employee of the Go to the Forest organization, which helps Russian deserters.
The interaction of deserters with a number of countries of the former Soviet Union, including Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. This is always a very difficult and delicate moment. This is not the country that are willing to accept, in principle, any of the anti-war Russians, provendo configured, know anything. Yes, because they have their own history, their own peculiarities, and their own subtleties. There was no practice of accepting Russian deserters in the case of Lithuania. France is open to them. Spain is also partly open there, probably. Germany is even ready to accept them. Eastern Europe, what is called the former socialist camp, are not the countries where they are ready to see them, where they, in principle, want to cancel at least something in common, at least with some Russians, anti-war or pro-war. Actually, the main subtlety here is that after crossing the border, you need to voluntarily surrender to the authorities and tell them to find border guards there in advance using GPS and maps to see where the nearest border checkpoint is located, in order to come to the border guards. Yes, they may not be there in this booth where they should be sitting. But in general, find them anyway and surrender to them. If it happens back, if they find you, this will be a completely different calico. This is the whole subtlety and the whole difficulty. Accordingly, in the case of Lithuania, it was as if the subtlety of the situation was that the young man did not give up, that he was hiding. This is the main mistake, in fact, that he made. There is no practice, thank God. There are no mass deportations there from somewhere. Yes, even in the case of America, there is no deportation. There were cases when people who applied for asylum were deported, let's assume. But they, fortunately, were not very large. These were, as a rule, those who do not have lawyers. For example, who has been in prison 4 months, and some 4 years. Therefore, as if this is the lack of practice, it actually gives hope first of all, and gives faith that common sense will win after all. And Lithuania will not expel him.
Well, that's where I have to say goodbye. Thanks to everyone who spent this hour and 43 minutes with us. My name is
Всем привет, дорогие друзья! Меня зовут Вася Обломов. В ноябре 2025 года у меня выходит новый альбом, который называется «Как все было на самом деле». И в связи с этим я поеду в тур и буду играть концерты. Приходите, увидимся.